Hello guys, and welcome to this new video. So it's the second game of the round 2 of the World Chess Cup in Baku 2015, and we are here with Adams, which has to win against Laznicka in the second game because he lost the first one, and he goes e4. So he's going for an aggressive play. E4 is good when you have to win. It's a good move. To make more open, more dynamic positions. Laznicka enters c5, knight f3, e6, d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c6, knight c3, and pawn to a6. So this is the Taimanov, the Sicilian Taimanov. The idea of a6 is to protect the b5 squares, so it means at some point we can either push b5, but also we want to play the queen to c7 and not be attacked by the knight on b5. So this is the theory. White goes knight takes c6, b takes c6. Of course, you take with the d pawn, the queen are exchanged. Bishop d3, d5, seizing the center, short castle. So now you don't want to take the pawn, because if you take, knight takes back and your pawn are weak on c6 and a6. So you keep your pawn structure like that. You go knight f6, threatening the e4 pawn, queen f3, protecting the pawn, bishop e7, continuing the development. Here the most popular move is e5, which is followed by knight d7. But white plays queen g3, it's also theoretical, threatening g7. Short castle, bishop h6, take care of the checkmate in one move. Knight e8, protecting the pawn, this is pretty much the only move to protect it. And bishop to f4, so this is still theoretical. And here the usual move, but there are very few games for black, is pawn to a5. Starting to expand, I mean to push the pawns, to put pressure on this b2 pawn. Laznicka decides to go bishop h4, threatening the queen, queen f3, and bishop back to e7. So somehow he misplaced the queen, bringing back the queen to f3. But I mean, playing two moves like that, just to make sure the queen is not on g3 but on f3, I'm not sure it's that good, because I mean the queen is well placed on f3 as well, and there are other pieces that we could improve for the moment. I mean, queen g3 would not be the move we would play here with white. Would better use the tempo for something else. So I don't really like this bishop h4, bishop e7 idea. Adams play a very interesting move here. So the play for white is probably at some point play e5 and attack the king side, right? It's logical, everything is placed for this. But Adams is playing first knight to a4, looking toward the b6, c5 squares, especially b6 of course. So the queen cannot come anymore to b6 to attack b2. The pawn on b2 is protected, and the knight is looking at key squares. So Mickey Adams is using the knight to slow down the play for black on the queen side, and just afterward he's going to play on the king side. So black plays knight f6 now, attacking the center, so the knight left, so we try to attack the center back with a knight. White goes b3, so he's protecting the knight and also maybe preparing c4 in some variation, so he's making prophylactic play on the queen side. And now you might think that pawn takes, bishop takes, knight takes, queen takes, so winning the bishop pair might lead to an advantage for black. But after queen d5, a good move to protect the pawn, queen e3, white has very easy play because bishop on c8 still not developed, and the pawn structure with the pawn on a6 and c6 is bad. So white is going to quickly finish the development with rook fd1, bringing this rook on d1, seizing the open file, and maybe knight b6 to win back the bishop pair, and white has a good positional advantage. So even if black put pressure on the e4 square, on the e4 pawn, white doesn't have to protect it for the moment. So black goes queen a5, he's preparing for c5, c4. White goes e5 now. Now it's time to close the center and to start to attack the queen side. The king side, sorry. Knight d7 and queen to g3. Coming back now on g3, so we enforce the pawn on e5, really well protected. And we threat bishop h6, the knight can't come back to e8 for the moment. So black goes rook f8, rook e8. So now after bishop h6, he can meet this with bishop f8. So no point for white to play that. White is bringing a new piece to the attack, and this is the h pawn, h4. So bringing a new piece here. Black goes c5, and here I give you 10 seconds to find the good positional move to answer the c5 moves that just arose on the board. So 10 seconds from now. And this is the move c4. I hope you found that a very good move because, I mean, black was threatening c4, problems with the knight. So now we play c4 ourselves. If black takes the pawn, we take it back. And this pawn on c5 is bad, and the knight on d7 is even worse because it doesn't have landing squares anymore. And so white is better on both sides of the board. I mean, queen side, we are perfectly safe with a better pawn structure. We could harass even this pawn, maybe later on in the game. And on the king side, with this pawn on e5, which is a big asset for us, we are able to launch an attack. So white would be a much better positionally if he takes the pawn. So he can either keep it like that, but I mean, anyway, you're always going to face pawn takes, and if you take with the pawn, I'm not very sure it's good, especially if your bishop lands to b7, like bishop b7. Didn't analyze that, but I believe even pawn takes might be a good move, not talking about continuing the attack. So black is playing d4 just to solve the problem anyway. White was the only colors that could take the pawn one day, and preparing now to bring the bishop on the long diagonal. But white is a lot of tempo up. He goes h5. Look at that. It's really looking dangerous around the king. Queen c7. Rook a e1 now. So he protects the pawn even more, and maybe a rook lift might happen someday. But it's very enforcing the e5 pawn. Bishop f8. So he's going to protect his side. And now bishop to g5. So white maybe wants to bring the bishop to f6 later on, and to push the pawn f4 and f5 to open up all this play. So we can really feel here, even if the computer doesn't really see it at first, like if you ask the computer at start, it gives you plus 0.20 for white, but the more you think, the more you play with it, the more you understand white is much better. This bishop on d3, just a dream bishop, stopping the pawn. The knight on a4 somehow is not that bad as it controls the queen side, though you can maybe someday bring it back through this pass. I mean, it's long, but black has a lot of problems just to find counterplay. It's hard to attack for black. Here, Laznicka is going to play an imprecise move, g6. You know, you don't really like to move your pawns when you are attacked, and it's really weakening. You can feel that. But I try to play more naturally, like bishop b7. Had a look with bishop c2 for white. Bishop c6, so trying to find counterplay for black. I played those moves. Queen d3. Forcing g6. So you see, it's a good plan for white anyway to force g6. So g6 is really losing tempo. White could follow up with f4 now. Queen a5. Try to find counterplay for black. But now after king f2, bishop e7, pawn take, bishop e7, rook e7, so play those moves. I believe that white has a very strong attack coming through the h file, and is really much better. I mean, the game for black on the queen side is way too slow. So that was an example. It was a better play, better attempt for black, but after bishop g5, g6, now white plays f4, and it's exactly the same position as we had, only the bishop is on c8 instead of c6. I mean, it's too tempo. So it's a big difference. Bishop g7. Now white goes queen h4, bishop b7, so finally playing that. And now you have 10 seconds, or you can pause the video, of course, to find the final plan to finish the game. So white goes king to f2. I hope you found that. You had the right answer. With the idea to double the root, I mean to double the pieces on the h file and just penetrate through the h file. So black goes rook f8. Maybe he had to try something else. This is probably the last mistake. After that one, it's over. He could have tried to defend with knight f8. Maybe rook h1. Bishop c6, and give up this pawn, or I mean pawn knight takes c5. Here he is winning, so maybe let's say queen a5 to continue to try to play bishop f6. But after bishop f6, I mean threatening to take, like if you play a nonsense move, bishop c6, we could take queen f6 and pawn to h6, just to give an example of how white could finish the game with the attack on g7. So knight f8 was the last move trying to do something, but after rook f8 as played in the game, white goes rook h1, pawn to f5, pawn takes at g6, pawn takes g6, queen h7 check, and rook h6, totally penetrating the king side, and black resigned. Queen g6 is unstoppable, and this is going to be a checkmate in just a few moves. The king doesn't have time to escape. In fact, the best move here would be knight takes e5, rook takes e5, and rook h8, trying to save the day. But I mean, you're already a piece down, and white pieces are still coming to you. So a good win by Mickey Adams in this game. Would be interesting to see the tie breaks. I hope Mickey is able to keep his dream on and goes to the next round. Let's hope for Mickey that he wins this. I love to cheer for the old glory of the game, old legends. Now we're going to watch an instructive endgame between Sergei Koryakin and Alexander Onichuk. I remind you that Koryakin lost the first game against Alexander Onichuk and had to win the second one. And he's in this endgame, which is favorable for white, as the a-pawn is a really strong asset here, as it's hard for the bishop to activate through the diagonals. That stops him. He's just watched the pawns. So it's a very strong pawn. And I thought myself, when I watched the game, that white had very good chances to win this one, as I did study this type of endgame. And I know that those endgames with opposite colored bishop and rooks are really hard to defend, very inconvenient to defend, and against a good specialist of the endgame like Sergei Koryakin, it was always going to be hard for Onichuk to defend that. But the commentators thought that Onichuk had good chance to draw. I was pretty surprised. Well, he has good chance. I mean, he has chances to draw, but I mean, I thought that it was a really good outcome of the opening for Koryakin to find himself in this endgame. So he went rook e-a3. This is a very important move, because in order to win those type of endgames, you have to trade a pair of rook. If you trade a pair of rook, it makes life a lot easier. So rook e-a3, white is threatening rook a8. Black goes rook d to d8, white goes rook to a7, pawn to h6, and rook to c7. So finally white is trading up a pair of rook. Rook takes, bishop takes, rook d3. Sorry, it's not the right square, rook d3. And here rook takes d3 would be a big mistake, as you don't want to have another pair of rook off the board. It would just be the opposite colored bishop, and it's always, I mean, it's often a draw. So you have to keep the rooks on the board. Rook a8, check. So the king has to go away. And now recycling the bishop to a5 to bring bishop either to d3, either to d2 if needed. And here it's very, very, very complicated for black to stop this a pawn. As I said, the diagonal are not available for the bishop, neither this one, as the pawns are blocking him. And the only way to come to one of those diagonals, I mean the one a8, d5, is the one we are looking for, is to give up a pawn. So virtually, black has to be a pawn down already. I mean, somehow, if he wants to stop the pawn, he probably has to give up a pawn somewhere, and he still has trouble to stop the side pawn. So he goes h5. He has to search for counterplay on the other side of the board. White goes h4, stopping the expanding of the pawn structure. Bishop to f5, and pawn to a4. So white is 1, 2, 3, 4 steps away from glory. Here, black goes rook d6. It's probably a mistake. It's not making a lot of work to stop the pawn. He could have tried c5, bishop c3, bishop d7, pawn to a5, bishop to a4, threatening checkmate, bishop d2, rook d4, attacking the pawn, rook c8, rook takes h4, threatening checkmate, and bishop c3. I stopped the analyze here, so it was another attempt, interesting one. And just to show you, even playing those good moves, those computerish moves with black, the computer is still giving and is giving a better and better and better advantage with each move to white, because this pawn is running, and it's a problem. I mean, black won a pawn and maybe can find some counterplay, maybe somehow he can win another pawn and sack the bishop against the pawn, or come back with the rook with some checks, trying to stop it, like by example rook h1, playing like that to stop the pawn. But I mean, after rook takes c5, by example, white is already looking to be a pawn up. And I mean, the amount of pressure white is putting here is very big. So, move c5, I don't know, it's an attempt, not sure it's a good move. Black goes rook d6. He didn't find either way to stop that. Bishop to c3. So, coming on this good square and allowing the pawn to push. c5, a5, so white is pushing, and now rook g6. And this is really the fatal mistake for black. Could have tried bishop e6 to bring back the bishop to d5 to make it hard to push. So by example, rook a7, bishop d5, rook c7, looking to win a pawn, rook c6, rook e7, f6, and well, white is probably, or even is better, but he still has to find a way to push its pawn. So, I mean, black is pretty much stuck, but it's unclear how white will proceed to win the game. Still has to find a good plan to finish the job. Of course, maybe he could deviate before in my analyze by playing the move a6, by example, was also possible playing like that. And trying maybe to bring the king is another option. But at least it would have made the job for white a bit harder. Because after rook g6, pawn to a6, rook g2, rook f8, threatening a7 and threatening the pawn, bishop e6, pawn to a7, bishop d5. So he sacks the bishop against the pawn, pawn a8, bishop takes a8, rook takes a8. And here it's move 40 for black, so he was in time trouble. It's his last move. And he's just giving up the game away immediately. He goes rook f2, and this is going to be over very quickly. He could have tried rook h2 to thread this pawn, because if you have this h-pass pawn, I mean, it's threading, and it's not easy again this time for white to stop it. So white has to protect it. Bishop e1, by example, rook e2, threading the bishop. So if you go rook bishop c3, black goes back rook h2. Sorry. So no point, it's that. So white goes bishop g3. Now black goes c3. pawn takes, rook e3, threatening the 2 pawns, king c2, rook f3, bishop d6, and pawn to f6, trying to go to win this h4 pawn. Okay, this is probably winning for white, but black could have tried to get the draw. Remember, if Onichuk draws, he is through. So he could have at least keep playing the game and try to do something as I mean, you can push g5 and have those pass pawn. I mean, white will win, I guess. I mean, I'm pretty sure, but you still have your 10 or 5% of chance to hold it. So it's better than nothing. Though black went rook f2, and after rook to c8, he did resign because, okay, rook f3 is the only move you can play here. Rook takes c5, and I mean, you are already losing another pawn. So, for example, you go g6 to save your g pawn, or maybe king g6 is better. It doesn't change much. Rook takes c4, and we have the same position as I showed earlier. Just you are not able to push the pawn, so now it's very easy to go to queen the pawns for black. So Sergei Karyakin tied the match, and we are going to witness a rapid match between those two. And so it brings us to the last pair of the day that we have. It's between Veselin Topalov and Sergei Zhigalko. Not showing the most interesting position, but just I'm teaching often to my pupils to win a simple basic rook endgames. And so I thought that you will understand why, but in this game we had a chance to see a basic chess endgames, and it's really rare in the big games nowadays. So I took the chance, decided to take the chance to see that. So it's black to play here. So white has the 2 pass pawn. I mean, white is absolutely winning, and black is playing the move d3. Now it's a bit tricky, as after rook takes d3, if you play king takes d3, knight e5 check, pawn take, rook here, and king e4, black has the move, maybe you can try king c6, and should be winning for white anyway, but it's not that clear. I mean, all those endgames are really tricky, so the move rook d1 would be needed to cut off the king, and I'm not sure either white can win here or not. It's my mistake. Yeah, I need to check back this in my database. But it's an harder work. Surely that's what happened in the game. As after pawn d3 goes rook c1, king b5, and king takes d3. So now after knight takes, pawn takes, rook takes, king e4, the king is cut even a file further. So black goes rook to g2, pawn to e6. So now the pawn is just driving. King b6, king e5, king b7, pawn e7, rook e2, king f6, rook f2, king e6, rook e2, so giving checks to force the king to hide behind the pawn. And now, in order to win this position, you have to do what we call a bridge. So white is going rook to c4. It's a very important move. It's the Lucena position. It's very rare to get it at such a high level. Usually players resign a lot earlier, but here rook c4, rook f1, king d7, rook d1, king e6, rook e1, king d6. And now the idea is that after rook d1 check, white can play king e5, rook e1, and make the bridge rook e4 in order to queen the pawn. So this is what we call the Lucena position, this one. And rook c4 this is the Lucena position, and rook c4 is what we call making a bridge. So rook f1, king d7, rook d1, king e6, rook e1, king d6. So black is trying king b6. So now after rook c5, rook takes c7. He's kind of saving the day. but the pile of 2,800, over 2,800, don't know the exact rating. He doesn't play rook c5, he goes rook b4 check, king a7, and rook b5. And so now on the next move, white is going to play rook e5 and finish the job, finish the bridge. Just for the one wondering, after king a6, white is playing rook to b8 and it's queening on the next move as the rook now protects the last square. So you can give checks, but now the king doesn't have to follow the pawn, and on the next move it's going to be a queen. So thank you for watching this second round of the second round with me. I hope the tiebreak are going to be exciting. I believe that the Chess Bras are going to make the live coverage, so I recommend you to have a look at their coverage. They do that, and I wish you a good day, and see you for the third round. Bye.